Just preface everything with bio.
Preface everything with bio. So, you know, biomimetic, how to mimic nature, how to learn from nature's genius, you know, and it's all around us. This whole place is a canvas for biomimetic art, biokinetic, biological, there's a whole lot of bios we could yeah, so so that's then west, yeah?
Yeah.
Or west-ish. You got a feature here which you can't. So there's a view line. You know, this is an amazing spot because you can see that whole north range.
Yeah.
So that view line opens up.
Yeah.
So because you're on the watershed, this spot is absolutely 360.
Yeah.
All of this.
Yeah.
You really make something.
Yeah.
You know, so this is the hub. This is all the partying and
Yeah.
stuff's going on around here.
Yeah. And the things.
And then there's maybe the back, you know, there's a view,
Opening up.
a vista line here that we see
Opening
through
up.
it, like,
Yeah.
you know, anchored on that
Yeah.
Tafelberg over there,
One there
whatever.
and one there. Yeah.
Yeah. Team camp.
Yeah.
And then the village, the kind of town, you know, this scale, literally, two
Yeah.
bubbles,
Yeah.
there and there. Side by far.
Totally.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And what's nice about these is they're on the east, and they kind of, you know,
Hello. Hello all, and welcome to our third and final installment of our AfrikaBurn Intersect series, where this one is called Watch This Space. And I'm sure that you guys just did watch this space and you saw Kwacha and all its beauty. It was actually just mind-blowing. So this session is going to be recorded. So if anyone feels uncomfortable about being recorded, you may kindly watch on YouTube, but understand that all this interaction and this discussion is absolutely going to be recorded. And we'll keep replaying some of the series over time. Okay, so today we are, as I said, looking at custodianship and stewardship of Kwaggafontein. Hence, I had said, you know, even on our blurbs on Facebook, I'm like, do you have any question? Does anybody have one more question about Kwaggafontein? Is there anything that you want to know? Do you have any sort of ideas or concerns, whatever? This is the conversation where we talking about that kind of thing, and what do we mean by custodianship and stewardship as for Kwaggafontein as a cultural space, and how we're going to ensure inclusivity in this space, how we're going to ensure that we bring everybody along, and that we all get to experience and participate in this amazing space. So without further ado, I'm going to introduce our panelists for today. So we have got Monique, that we all know, and she'll introduce herself. We've got Alex Marsh, and we've got Gail Steger from What If, and she's also going to introduce herself. So I'll start with Monique, and then followed by Gail, and then Alex is going to lead us into a contextualization about what is this custodianship of this space, and what are the kind of things that have been going on in that space, and then what are the cultural considerations that we should sort of be looking out for in the near future. So Monique, please introduce yourself and tell us what you've been up to, at least recently.
So hi everybody, lovely to see everyone. My name is Monique Schiess. Sure. So I'm one of the founders of AfrikaBurn. I'm currently a creative lead, liaison, development lead. I am heading up most of the development on Kwaggafontein, the new land for AfrikaBurn. And I've recently just been there for 3 weeks, initially doing a kind of preparing and hosting the kind of delivery of the first kind of conceptual artwork on Kwaggafontein, which is a very interesting story in itself, but I'm not going to talk about it right now. but it was filled with hilarity and fun. The next thing we did was the eco trip, which is the first iteration of our ecological restoration work on Kwaggafontein in the form of a small event, starting at home along permaculture principles, where we actually starting to put in a food garden at Kwaggafontein and start doing the kind of mitigation work on at the homestead. And then after that, there was another small event on the site organized by one of the theme camps, which is called the Tankwatown Art Appreciation Society. So it was the first opportunity to actually live on the event site, proposed event site for a period of time and see how people engaged with it, which was a very, very valuable thing to do. And was also extreme amounts of fun, wonderful to connect and to be in that space. So yeah, that's what I've been busy with. Now I'm back working. I mean, that's work too, but in the office working.
Thanks, Mons. Gail, could you just give us a little bit of an introduction of who you are before we move on to Alex? And I just want to note that unfortunately Roger's back was a bit sore, so he couldn't join us today. And we kind of lost touch with Mr. Stephen Sack, but I'll touch on some of those points. And I think that Gail, you'll also be able to speak on those kind of things as well. So who is Sister G?
Okay, so I run an organization called the What If Trust. We have been operating in Diepsloot since 2013. And we came there as a result of some stakeholder consultation with Dr. Barbara Holtman, who does an amazing process called What Does It Look Like When It's Fixed? It's not a great name because Diepsloot's not broken, but it's a lovely way of envisioning what the future could look like. And so we spent quite a lot of time in Diepsloot looking at what could Diepsloot look like when it's fixed. And what really hit me really hard was how many creative people there are. By definition, so for those of you who don't know, Diepsloot is north of Johannesburg. I prepared a little bit of a presentation, but I'm not going to show you now. I might just show you some stuff later. You know, it's got 800,000 residents, 50% of them are foreign. It's 13 square kilometers. It's got incredible poverty, but it's also got, you know, brick houses and you know, people with driveways and dogs and all of those sorts of things. But what struck me was the creative spirit. The amount of people who wanted to do things in the creative space, but they needed simple things like access to technology, access to data, access to opportunities. And so in 2016, Ericsson helped us build a tech and creative hub, which is a beautiful space. It's a containerized structure where we nurture and develop creative talent. And so, yeah, I guess I earned the title of Sister G. My name is Gail. I earned the title of Sister G around about 2016. People in the beginning were like, what are you doing here? You know, how long are you going to be here? You won't last. And yeah, things are rough sometimes. They're quite difficult, but I've lasted. You know, here we still are. And we probably have about 60 or 70 creatives on our database. That's everything from filmmakers, photographers, graphic designers, tattoo artists, fashion designers, a whole host of real creative talent, but with some challenges, which hopefully I'll be able to get to touch on as the evening progresses. So thank you for having me. Cindy, you there?
Yes, I'm there. Sorry, my internet is a little bit wonky today, so bear with me, guys. I'm here.
Okay, good.
Yes. Alex, could you please kindly give us a bit of an intro? I know we did a blurb on you on Facebook and Sister G, but could you give us a rundown on who Alex is, and could you give us a contextualization of the what we mean by custodianship and stewardship of Kwaggafontein? And what are the kind of cultural, ecological aspects that are being considered at the moment, and kind of like what's on the horizon?
Sure, thanks, Cindy, and thanks for bringing us together. My name is Alex Marsh. During the day, I'm a policy advisor in the biodiversity sector in South Africa, and in the evenings and weekends, I do some work with a whole bunch of amazing people at AfrikaBurn. I started becoming involved in AfrikaBurn to think more about inclusivity and diversity and what it means to bring a transformational agenda into the space. And that was 5 or 6 years ago. And in the past couple of years, I've been working, sorry about the dogs, closely with Mons and a bunch of other people on what it means to honor this gift that we've been given. In 2019, we were gifted land in the Tankwa, Valfontein, and Kwakkerfontein, and it's such a huge shift. This is the biggest transformation that AfrikaBurn has ever gone through. We've gone from having a space that we lease for a few months every year to having a space where we are custodians, where we are neighbors, where we are stewards of a space, and entering into a completely different kind of social contract with the land and the people who are on it and who have been on it. So it really is a new thing for us, and we don't have all the answers. We're figuring it out in conversation with each other, and increasingly we hope with all of you, which is why I'm so grateful to Cindy for opening up the space to start having bigger conversations about what this really means. Because we have the principles, the AfrikaBurn's principles, but what does that mean in this new context? What does it mean to apply principles like leave no trace and decommodification and various other things when we're situated, when we're really grounded in a space? And we're not starting from scratch in this thinking. I mean, Monique has been thinking through these ideas for many years. So it's not like we're coming in having not considered anything, but we are a collective. And this is not a situation where we want a few people to dictate the course of how we are in the future. And so taking time to like reach out and really figure out how we move forward together is so important. So there's on the one hand, there's this work we're doing now of creating a container of this is how we're holding the space. These are the studies we're doing. This is the body of knowledge we're building up. These are the structures. So I'm currently the chair of the Land Steering Committee, which Mons also sits on, along with Dion, who is here, and various other people, to come up with a policy that helps us to express how we're going to make decisions on the space. But we're also thinking through how we create an enabling environment and a platform for a larger community to bring their inspiration and ideas and be able to help them create what they want to bring into being on the space. So it's a really exciting moment in our journey. And functionally what that looks like, that there's a land steering committee, and we're looking at creating a strategic advisory panel with people who are out there in the world, experts in restoration, in earth jurisprudence, and in various other things that we want to percolate into our thinking. But it's also a raft of working groups that some of them have started and some of them haven't yet. So looking at how we engage with ecological restoration, town planning, the circular economy, various groupings of people, and we're so looking for people with expertise and the inclination to bring themselves into those collectives of people to think more about how we can do something in a way that really is quite transformational and new, and not necessarily holding to the old forms that have held in the past. So we have some big ideas, and a few examples of those is thinking through what radical regeneration could look like on a landscape that is radically degraded. It's been used extractively for hundreds of years. It's been overgrazed. It's been hunted. Like that has been the way that this land has been engaged with to date. And how do we shift that? How do we figure out how to bring back some of the grasses that could make that landscape more fertile and healthier for the things that live there, with a mind on the fact that the Tankwa Karoo is changing. Climate change is happening. It's going to change the landscape into the future. And how do we hold that and bring the new opportunities that could exist in that space to bear? So, alongside that comes ideas around how we engage with the circular economy, looking at turning human manure into seed bombs that help us to do radical regeneration. Also thinking about the new ways of engaging with the community. The dynamic in the Tankwa and the rest of South Africa, where colonial rule robbed so many people of access to spaces that belong to them, is very present for us. And how do we start to create new social contracts that start to heal and start to address that dynamic that has had such an impact on so many people's psyche. Also looking at, just how we are neighbors with the farmers around us, and looking at the new horizons around renewable energy that's starting to come to bear in the Tankwa. Like, how do we rise to meet all of that? And then in terms of activating the space, we've had lots of conversations about what that might mean for what happens on Kwagga and Valfontein in a year-long. We don't have this beat anymore of a few months where it's active and then we leave. So what does that mean for how we are there fully throughout the year? And something that's coming up this year is we have a little bit of funding from the Solidarity Fund to do a skills development program of work with women and non-gender conforming people to build skills to have conversations about gender-based violence and other social issues on site there, to start to figure out how we are situated in that space and what we want to bring more of into the world. So my last thoughts and ones, if you want to add anything at this point, please do, is, we're really opening it up, and we're looking for all kinds of energy and expertise. We're looking for people who want to dream with us. We're looking for people who want to come and dig really deep holes that are really hard to dig. The eco camp, we dug 16 holes that were like a meter deep and a meter wide, and it took hours, but we planted some trees, and eventually we're going to have some shade in a space. So whether you're bringing a deep technical skill or just energy, we're really looking to open up how we think about how we engage in this space, because in this time of uncertainty and planning has become like this impossible, like crystal ball exercise. What we have left are like the relationships that we can build, and how we move forward in relationship as we are in the process of forming, is kind of what I wanted to open with. Thanks, Cindy.
Thank you. That was beautiful. I think my only sort of question would be for just around that would be for you and Mons, because I think you've snatched some of the other questions that I had, which is around what is the actual ecological strategy. And I think that you've given light to that. But for me, I want to ask you and Mons, so how do you intend to marry create the creativity that everybody brings in and the ecological considerations? Mons?
Sure. I mean, for me, everything that we do is a creative act. So in terms of, if you look at the model of the AfrikaBurn event that we do, which is a blank canvas upon which we invite people to express anything, to participate, to come and put their care and love or whatever it is. You know, theoretically it's a non-judgmental space, and anything that you want to put into that civic space that we co-create together is a valid thing, whether it's a tray of cookies or a giant sculpture or a service or whatever. And by the same token, the same applies to Kwaggafontein, is that we've got this beautiful space, this incredible gift that's been given to us, and kind of moving that gift on is so fundamentally important. So it's the opening of that up, and so just like if you don't bring any classically creative projects to Tankwa Town, the annual event, even if you're learning how to putting in a piece of rebar or how to camp or whatever, is a fundamentally creative project. That's why we very often don't use the word art when we are talking about the creative projects at AfrikaBurn, because it's quite a modernist term, and it kind of denotes kind of quite a judgmental, that's a beautiful thing, and you know, you can look at it and consume it or not. You know, it kind of commoditizes it to a degree. And so for me, I don't see that it's an either or, marrying the ecological imperatives, because it's all about care and relationship, and it really, and so the transformative potential of doing creative projects together, is a radically tried and tested and proven thing at the Burn. You know, I've seen it for all these years, is that toiling next to each other and being in a collaborative space is a very fertile space. Kwaggafontein is a fertile space. It's very denuded ecologically, but it's a fertile space in terms of what it does for our psyches, and that open space and the inspiring kind of nature of it. And to take the energy that our community has built over all these years of, we literally have been exercising a muscle of care, collaboration, ingenuity, experimentation, all that kind of stuff. And that's, so creative crews working out, kind of collecting together, doing the thing together, that's exercising a muscle that goes dormant in the default world, you know, in a hyper-consumptive transactional kind of scenario. And that in its best iteration is what Burn is supposed to do. So we have got no relevance in the world unless we are dealing with very head-on with creativity, care, love, relationship, all those things that are the alchemy that make the Burn projects work, as relates to ecological restoration, because we have fucked the earth proper, you know, and what are we calling ourselves, a caring bunch of people, if we are not going to take, it's a bit of an Aikido move. It's taking the energy of the Burn and turning it like a tanker in the ocean towards a different thing, which is, but again, it's not a creative project, because it's going to be just giving love to that land in any way possible. And the thing is, again, it's that open source model, which Alex was saying, is like, it's an open invite, and we have got the most phenomenal volunteers working on, you know, we've got ecologists and botanists and people coming up with ideas of art residencies, and just the kind of mind space of being in an open area with like not any sound and not any kind of like noise of the urban environment. And it really is the sky is the limit. So for me, yeah, we don't need to marry them, because they are married already, because it's about love, care, ingenuity, creativity, experimentation.
Thank you so much, Mons. So we'll get back onto that little bit of a topic again. But I thought what was interesting and why we juxtaposed it, Gail, was because we said, you know, if we took this series of discussions through a journey where we started looking at our systems and our policies and how we do things. We introspected, we shone a light, and we took a mirror and we looked at our processes. And we looked at how we incubated the arts with our second series, and how we upholding the system, how we creating access, how we being more inclusive, and so forth, and we looked at art centers, we looked at township artists, we looked at rural artists that are out on the fringe. We looked at the distance that one travels to get to Kwacha or previously Stony. And I know that when you are asking people to maybe participate, to contribute, to volunteer, to help build this community center that you've got going on, we say that major art centers in South Africa are traditionally in city centers or at a distance to communities. Okay. So I think for me, it's like, what has changed in the cultural sector in South Africa to bring art closer to communities? And I guess, Gail, this is where you come in, where you've taken the initiative to go into distant space where people are like, oh, it's far. I'm not really interested in going so far. How have you broken the barrier to inculcating people to be part of your movement, given where people think that you're at a distance?
Sure. Interesting question. I mean, I think what's excited me about the conversation, and maybe is part of answering that question, is that we see everything that we do systemically. And I'm loving, what everybody is saying about, Kwaggafontein is a system. There's everything is connected. And I didn't really include it in my conversation when I introduced myself, but we're running a huge project at the moment with a permaculture, with worm farms, with vermiculture. And we get young people to bring in, so I'm not answering your question and I'll try and get there, but we have young people who bring in and trade wet waste for stuff that we have in an eco trading store. And then we get the outside community. So we are surrounded by Dane Fern, Kyalami. We're surrounded by these beautiful spaces, and we're in this really crappy space.
Yeah.
And people don't really want to come there. They're kind of like really, scared, and they want to help, but they kind of want to, just dip their toe in or whatever. And when you say to them, let's try and marry what you're doing and what you want to do, so people can grow seeds and seedlings and bring them to us. We've got young kids. So we run Dr. Jane Goodall's Roots and Shoots program. We're very big on education. So young children are being taught about the interconnectedness between animals, people, and the environment. And that's connected to the people in the creative space. And it's connected to the people, the gogos who knit and crochet beautiful blankets and things like that, because, that's also art. So we've tried to look at this systemically. We've tried to look at making everything connect. But I just want to, the eco trading store is really how we bring the outside in and the inside out. Yeah. So people can bring us eco bricks, and we build structures with eco bricks. We teach young people how to build with eco bricks, but we also get youngsters to do eco bricks, which we then trade. So we trade in the eco trading store seedlings, wet waste, and eco bricks and recyclable material. And our eco trading store is full of previously loved clothing, stationery, non-perishable foodstuffs, toiletries. So we have lots of creatives who are going to a gig or going to an audition and they don't have deodorant. Well, do an eco brick, go and get us some wet waste, come and trade it, and then you can buy something in the eco trading store. So we really have tried to connect a lot of things and kind of take the ugly out of an informal settlement in a township and try and make it beautiful. Our space is beautiful. Everything in the eco trading store is beautiful. People can buy nice things, and kids come there and they buy a wine glass for their mom for their birthday, or they buy sanitary towels for their sister or whatever. So it's a really, and that's how we have to look at it. So we try and connect the outside in and get people to come there by seeing the big picture, not just, the kind of the narrow maybe space that they, because everyone wants to help, everyone wants to do something, but don't make me get my hands dirty.
Yeah, true. That's an interesting one. I think no matter how different we may think our organizations are, at the end of the day, sometimes we kind of also deal with those kind of issues where people want to do like what we call a plug and play camp, where they want to come there and glamp and admire the work, but they don't want to participate. So, for instance, we are governed by a set of principles that we and that just changes our entire experience. And so I love how you are also sort of we're all thinking in the same way around our spaces and our communities.
Yeah. And when I looked at your principles, they're quite similar. We maybe don't use those words.
Yeah,
but
the same words. Yeah.
Yeah, radical inclusion is something that we have to do, and we've got to fight for, and we've got to consciously do it. We have to do it with intent. It doesn't happen. It doesn't happen by osmosis. You've got to make it happen.
Thank you. That's amazing, Gail. Would you at some point, I think what I'll do is I'll keep going, and then I'd like for you to show us your space, and I know you've got a bit of a slide going on there. I believe Stephen Sack is with us. He's made it. He's able to join us. So Stephen has given us last week when we spoke to Stephen, or when he presented, he gave us a government. He's got government background, right? He's been in governance in the art space and so forth, and he was part of like a lot of the creative, strategies and policies that helped to sort of govern this creative space, this public art, this art center space that we find ourselves in. And he spoke about a master plan that, hey Stephen, you spoke about a master plan that that government was putting together. And he said to us, we should consider creating, I believe, a social strategy where we're connecting with perhaps and the inclusive government economy, where we're looking at not just providing access, but bridging our practices to reach far-reaching spaces, art centers, community centers, the townships, looking at the township economy as a real thing. And looking at how to engage with that. And so, Stephen, what has changed in the cultural sector in South Africa to bring art closer to communities? Is it that particular strategy, or is it just a natural movement?
When I was listening to Gail describing what she does, like takes me back to the 1930s, because one of the things I did was the first history of Black South African art, and the way in which art operated was alongside the agricultural trade shows. So that's where you find the emergence that's the marketplace, particularly for the earliest Black artists. And then of course there's the Empire exhibition in the 1930s, which becomes the Rand show, which is the big agricultural show. And every year, artists and arts organizations would participate at the agricultural trade show. And so it feels like we're in a moment now where we're back to that kind of a production, and the artists come and they engage in agricultural shows. So that's a bit of deep time history. But in terms of the master plan, so within the current ANC government, as you all know, our dear President Cyril, he came up with this idea around, well, it's not only him, it's the ANC, social compacts. And what they're supposed to do is they're supposed to enable one to knit together partnerships, because partnerships between the public and the private sector are governed by quite a difficult legal regime. And you can all Google that, and you'll find on the National Treasury website how you're supposed to set up a public-private partnership. And it's quite onerous and it's quite complex. But if you set up a social compact in a sector, then that sector organizes everybody in that sector and brings them through representative bodies to the table to engage formally with the public sector. And out of the social compact, you articulate the vision and you identify the resources, and you put a plan on the table, and hopefully you get a combination of investors participating in a coordinated project. So one of the real complexities with the master plan is that it goes to 4 or 5 different ministries. So there's arts and culture, there's small business development, there's trade and industry, there's communications and digital innovation. There are also then others who think they play in the space, you know. So to actually, so who do you talk to? Which minister do you talk to? And that'll come out of your strategic plan. So if you think that the fertile ground is at the agricultural trade shows, then that'll be your strategy. It's not tourism now, can't be. It's not tourism now. And arts and culture is a department that has no capacity. And I'm busy doing an analysis of their vote, because they're vote 37. And I recommend it to everybody that you go and download vote 37, and you can join me in analyzing how that department spends its budget. Then you can go and look at all the votes of the other. So if it's agriculture, have a look at their vote and have a look there if there are spaces to unlock. When you do your social compact, you would invite the appropriate person to your meeting. But you must know that in this meeting, you're coming to the table with resources. You're coming with human resources, you're coming with an organized sector, you're coming with investments, and you're saying to government, can you do this? Can you apply this policy, this instrument, this enabler to our sector? And that's how you do it.
Of course, without having the challenge, Stephen, of the tail wagging the dog. So I've often found that when you are wanting to, you know, speak to government, you need to go with your plan, and you need to be quite firm on what's negotiable and what's not, and what's going to work and what isn't. Because, you know, even with us, you know, with GUTA and GIZ, we're trying to, you know, implement the creative economies in townships and all of that. Then government comes and they kind of want to steer you in their direction. So I've just always found I've got to be really firm in what we want to do and see how government becomes an enabler, not wait for government to tell us which direction we should go, because then you're blowing in the wind the whole time. So, you know, that for me, and sometimes I've walked away from government money or government, you know, intervention because it just hasn't been worth the effort.
Although I do understand what Stephen's saying, in that I like this, that what we used to do when I used to work with Learning Cape, for instance, to get funding, we would look at the government sort of they plan for the year after they do their budget speech, whatever, pick up which is the latest gravy train or whatever master plan or strategic thing that they've put in place, and we look at our practices and our objectives and see where do we fit in this, as Stephen is saying, in this social compact. And that's how then you have a targeted approach to getting funding.
But you still have a plan. You're using your plan.
You still have a plan. Yes. It's like this marriage that we're talking about. Because funding is a real issue that we all need to continuously consider as we go about what we do. All right. So does anybody from the audience have any questions that they'd like to pose to any of our speakers before we move on to the next little section? I don't see any questions. Okay, so I'm going to move along, if that's all right with everybody. Okay, so we're looking at measures to ensure equitable access and decision-making to disrupt the norm.
Cindy, before we move into that question, can I make one comment just around this issue of the dynamic of physical distance and like how hard it could be to do the thing you're trying to do in the space. it just made me think about at this recent eco trip, we had a town hall on the Sunday, which was wonderful and hilarious and important. But it started with our DPW lead, our Department of Public Works lead, just being like, guys, can we talk about shit? Can we talk, like, literally, can we talk about that? Because in the environment that we're in, everything that you bring becomes a thing we have to deal with. We're in that system. And I often, I've never considered myself an artist. Like, I am so in awe of these deeply artistic humans that I'm surrounded by in AfrikaBurn. But the more we talk about how we think about the resources around us, and how we work with them in a way that has artistry, the more creative we can all become. So we've been thinking a lot about the relevance of AfrikaBurn as an experiment to the rest of the world, to what we could bring more of into the world that is generative. And so we've spoken about kind of the seed bombs and the human manure, but also in terms of like plastic waste and various other things, how can we start to think creatively? Because it's so hard to cart everything in and cart everything out. And do you create more waste, or are you transforming it into something else that becomes valuable? And that is such an important piece of what we want to explore together in this new era. South Africa has a circular economy strategy, and we do relatively well in terms of the amount of recycling, but how do we bring these radically creative minds to bear on how we transform waste into other things, and how do we do experiments? Because I know some mad scientists in government who are really curious about within this context where we have this potentially closed system, like what kind of innovation is actually possible. And how can that model be used in townships and other spaces where resources become problematic for people? So that is a thought that sits very top of mind for me when we talk about the dynamics of artistry and what we do with the space that we inhabit. That's it.
All right, thank you. So I think, Gail, we're going to actually play your video, your slide. You can show us and tell us a little bit about your space before we move on.
Oh, okay, cool. Right, so who's pushing buttons for me? It's not a video, it's just a slide presentation.
I'll be here for you to switch through to the next.
Okay, so for those of you who perhaps live in Johannesburg, but I guess all of us all over South Africa, we're very used to seeing shack dwellings like this. And the interesting thing about Diepsloot is it was meant to be, transition. So extension 1 was meant to be places where people kind of stayed until they got, permanent housing. And 20 years later, there's still people living in extension 1 in Diepsloot. If you can just do the next slide for me, I've got a couple of statistics for you. So Diepsloot, if you're not from South Africa, Diepsloot translates into deep ditch, which is very unfortunate for such a marginalized place. We operate, you can see, quite close to the Diepsloot Mall. Maybe just build all the points for me. There's one more click if you don't mind. Great. So go back for me. Thank you. 12 square kilometers. It's got 13 extensions. It's got 800,000 and counting. When you talk to locals, they're talking about more than 1 million people currently living on 12 square kilometers. 50% are foreign, which brings an interesting dynamic to the heritage, cultural, creative kind of dynamic. But if you just have a look there, the really sad thing is, 2 parks, 1 fire station, one police station. So, just very, very under-resourced and people just having to kind of, make a plan for themselves. So if you can just hit the forward button for me. As I said to you earlier on, we're surrounded by enormous wealth. Bash, can you go to the next slide for me? Thank you. So we're surrounded by the famous Stain City, Kyalami. I mean, the picture of Dainfern, you can see that beautiful deep ditch that runs through Dainfern and then ends up, being in Diepsloot. And in Diepsloot, it's filled with building rubble. Babies are dumped there. It's really, really filthy. It's the cause of a lot of flooding in Diepsloot and real human tragedy. And as I say, yet, surrounding us is this beautiful space. And then if you have a look at the next slide, this is not necessarily how everybody lives, but there's a huge portion of Diepsloot where the housing is informal. And when one of these shacks, goes on fire, you've got sort of 20, 30, 40 shacks that are affected because they built against one another. I think what's really interesting, if you look at the bottom left-hand picture here, just with the toilet, in Extension 1, there are 640 street toilets. So there's no toilets to the home, no water or sanitation. And so with a population of registered housing in Extension 1, 39 families use 1 toilet. And that's quite scary if you think about it, because a family is probably 3 to 5 people. So can you just imagine what we take for granted in the morning when we get up and we need to go to the loo and, wash our hands? There's 39 other families who want to do the same. And there've been organizations that have been working to kind of create art around toilets, make your toilet look pretty, paint the door a whole lot of, different colors and that sort of thing. So huge inequality, but also fantastic innovation. Okay, Bash, thanks. Next one. I just really wanted to show you our space. So amidst all of that, we have 2 buildings. On the right, the Father Louis Blondel Center was built in honor of a French priest who was murdered in Diepsloot 10 years ago. And we run that as a business center. So there, both creatives and other businesses can come and get access to a computer, to the internet, and they can basically get a hot desk and, if you just go back, thanks, a hot desk and really get their, be able to run their businesses. And currently we support probably 80 to 90 small businesses. It does change. Some people use our facilities daily, others use it weekly, monthly, or on an ad hoc basis. But what you have in the gorgeous turquoise and green building is our tech and creative hub. So on the upstairs container that you can see, we have, and I think this is really important when we try and think about how are we going to enable, creatives wherever it is that you're thinking of doing. Space and place is really important. Resources. We always talk about skills, access to resources, and access to markets. So upstairs, we have a content lab. We've got 10 i7 computers. We've got Adobe Creative Suite. So we keep trying to provide resources to people in the community who want to monetize their creativity, because for us, that's at the end of the day, at the crux of the work that we do. And then just the last picture I wanted to show you is my gorgeous team of people, and we try and embrace the whole creative and cultural space that we're in. So thank you for that. And we look forward to all of you coming to visit us at some point, coming to see what we do. Thank you, Bash.
Wow. Thank you so much, Gail. That was interesting. Very harsh conditions, those that I saw. It's a pity, but so how we create, we also create a little town in the middle of the desert. But as Alex said, it's very considered. And there's intent behind how, through of the town planning, where we use our loo and what our loo is, what it looks like. Yeah, we also prettify our loos. But of course, as I said, there is definitely there are considerations, and I think the AfrikaBurn model for me is something that I wish could be taken. And if someone said there's a township that needs to be created, that the model, including the principles, could literally be taken and put into these communities, which is why when I go out, I do sort of my acculturation workshops with creatives in townships. That this is when I actually show them that there's a possibility. So it goes on that each one teach one principle that we've got, which is say, look, you can literally create and we do workshops around pollution systems. We do how to manage your water, how to manage your environment, and those sort of things. So I think that there's if we say that we've created AfrikaBurn as a model, then I think that it's a model that certainly we could share its pedagogy to township and informal settlements that are developing around. Because I think
that's radical inclusivity. That's fantastic. That's taking it the other way.
That is it. So somebody has a question before we move on, and that's from Thomas Steiner. It says, what about international connections with other burner communities that have or are in the process of owning their own land, like borderland, for example, so that concepts and solutions can be worked out together and experiences shared? I don't know it says, what about international connections? Monique, do you want to read that question and see if you want to tackle it?
Yeah. So I mean, we've got quite a close kind of relationship with Burning Man around the Fly Ranch project, and there's a lot of kind of synergies that are going on around that. And but I actually, funnily enough, I did not know that Borderland has got their own land. I've looked at the like Chicago. I think the Chicago burners have got their own land, and but on a much kind of smaller scale. The thing about the AfrikaBurn regional event is that it's we're the second largest in the world, so we're the next biggest after Burning Man, and a lot of the other regionals are far more tiny, which doesn't make it not relevant. But very often the sharing is it's kind of a little bit of a different, like it's a bit of an apples and pears scenario. But there are really lovely kind of like constitutions and stuff like that I have read around the kind of Chicago space and have kind of considered. But thank you for letting me know about Borderland, and I will certainly follow up on that. Okay, Borderland just raised 10 million Rand and placed their first bid on land yesterday. That's excellent news. So yeah, thanks for that, Thomas. We'll look into it. I haven't been reading my Burning Man rail very diligently, I have to admit. Capacity issues. Go Alex.
Okay, Alex.
Yeah, just one thing, and I'm really looking forward to us learning together more with other communities who are trying to do more of this kind of stuff in the world. The one dynamic that I'm really conscious of is our context in South Africa just matters. It's just so different from what other geographical spaces are dealing with. And I mean, one of the most powerful moments that we've had so far is when Mons and the UPS team organized a Meet the Land trip 2019, like feels like lifetimes ago now. But we invited a bunch of First Nations people to be there with us and to do a blessing, and Mons can speak more in detail. But what for me was so important is that that moment opened up a social contract with the ancestors of that place, and along with our opening into exploring Earth jurisprudence and how we can, work with a piece of land that's been abused in so many ways, and start to listen and figure out what it is that place wants for itself, and how to honor the ancestors of that place. That is a dynamic that we are moving out of, that is quite unique. And so as much as I think it's going to be really exciting to cross-pollinate and figure out how we can all do more innovative stuff together across the world, that there's a local context that is very sacred and very important, and it's very important to us to move out of the wisdom of those who can help us to make decisions around that. But thanks, Thomas. It's really exciting to hear about Borland.
Okay, thanks, Alex. So I'm going to move on to our next session now. And my first, so again, I've heard some talk, so you'll see it flying on Facebook or whatever, like, oh, who gets to go to the new land? Who gets to go on an eco trip? Who gets to go on, and I'm like, okay, is there a disconnect in terms of, provision of information? And I think it's every opportunity is an opportunity for clarity. But before I move into that, this is going to touch on that, like, what's the plan in terms of intro? I know that we're having our sort of people are able to camp, etc. But I think it's always an opportunity for clarity and just to understand what are the projects that are going to be happening that people can participate in, and are there Nate tickets available for that? What is available? What are the mechanisms to support those who wish to join crews that are going up there? So that's what I would like you, Mons, to wrap your head around that. But I want to first ask you a question, Monique, is how will AfrikaBurn develop criteria for permanent or semi-permanent artworks on Kwaggafontein?
Well, we will, like we do with everything, use a very consultative process. The one thing that we definitely know around semi-permanent artworks is so through the years at Stonehenge, which was our first home, we were slightly different from Burning Man in that they were on public land and we were on private land, and so the opportunity to leave artworks behind every now and then, so they would, last for, 1 or 2 years rather than, leave the entire site clear, which was quite lovely. And what you discover is how powerful a really beautifully constructed, beautifully intentioned piece can inhabit that landscape. So the model of like great openness and beautiful artwork is it's a very good one. And actually from that and watching how people through the year then, so for example, the biggest example was Subterfuge, which was just the most epic artwork, an anti-fracking piece made out of waste, just beautifully executed in the process and in what it ended up being. And, it was there in that landscape, and I think collectively everyone loved it so much that like 5 minutes before we were supposed to ignite it to burn, this radical wind picked up and we had to cancel the burn, and it stayed an extra year. And to watch the kind of pilgrimage of people returning to look at that artwork and kind of when you were alone in that space, not with 13,000 other peoples, there was this kind of reverence. It almost had that same effect on people as a cathedral does. People start whispering, or you kind of like lie there and you kind of stare in awe at the thing. Anyway, so that's the kind of model, and Kwaggafontein is a very large piece of land. It's very majestic, and that will add to the kind of experience of Kwaggafontein. And like I keep saying, there's a million ideas around Kwaggafontein. not only our ideas, but ones that are coming from the community, which it's really important to do because we are an open source model and a peer-to-peer model, which is an abundance model. You know, like only good things happen when you utilize that model. And as well as the fact that Kwaggafontein is a gift to us, we must gift that gift onwards. Because the gift moving on is very important. It's very important that its energy carries on moving. Sorry for sounding like a hippie, but I do have my taproot in that. So we've had a very solid and a very evolving creative grant process by which we have assessed creative grant projects and awarded them funding and decided how to curate the space and curate. I use it advisedly. It's not classic curation, but it's just really a little bit of kind of enabling and moving this that way. And really, with AfrikaBurn, the process is always more important than the end product, because it's like I say, the transformative potential of artworks and building artworks is so important to the work that we do. Because, as Gail was saying, it's a systemic thing, and we have to consider all of those elements in what we do. So I suspect that we're going to use the foundation of our creative grant process and all the lessons learned, and we'll probably be workshopping it with the community. But certainly my sense is that with the vast size and kind of majesty of Kwaggafontein, that it'll definitely lend itself to a certain amount of destination pieces, which are not within the town plan, you know, the busy hub of Kwaggafontein, but that'll be a sojourn place. It'll be something that you pack a backpack and then move towards. And it'll certainly help a lot with the, not help a lot, but it'll add to the experience of people coming to Kwaggafontein in out of event times. For me, it's a very, very exciting prospect. It makes my toes curl. I get so excited about it. Obviously, we're challenged in terms of funding at this juncture, but let's hope that it's just a hiccup in our history. So moving towards kind of having a couple of those destination pieces. But you know, the other thing about Kwaggafontein is it's not about what we are only going to do on that piece of land. Everything we do there, we want to move horizontally out into the world. So that subterfuge experience led very much to the idea of having a sculpture route. You know, you drive in the Northern Cape or in kind of these provinces which have got these vast open areas. You drive through these incredible landscapes and you know, strategically putting a sculpture here or there, because a lot of people do touring to go and see these kinds of out of the way places. In fact, that's how we found the Tankwa Karoo in the first place, through Conrad Hicks, who is a motorbiker and likes, you know, going to very remote places. So when we were saying, look, we need a place that is completely open, got nothing there, and he was like, oh, you must try the Tankwa Karoo. So yeah, I think that's the message we're going to use. We're going to definitely consult. I mean, look, the thing about Kwaggafontein is that the possibilities are infinite. I keep saying it. So I can't wait to get to that, but there's a lot of foundational work that we are having to do around the heritage, protecting the heritage sites that are already there, because especially with AfrikaBurn, we have a lot of people who are invested in that. So we've got to be very prepared for when the floodgates open and we can gather again in bigger amounts, etc., so that we are protecting that heritage and also showcasing it. It's very, very important for us to show the layers of history, because land is not just land. This is a place that was very distinctly inhabited. I mean, there's old trek routes on that land. And for me, it's quite exciting that the event site is at a confluence of two old trek routes. You know, there's something kind of energetically exciting about it. And certainly having had the first tiny events there, kind of watching people's response to that space is very exciting. I'm kind of living vicariously through them. Yeah, so I'm sorry, I'm rambling, but yeah, it's I look very forward to doing it. We actually have our first semi-permanent piece coming, which is an aircraft which will be turned into a windmill but that's a whole other story, which you will all read in the socials in due course.
Yeah, I've heard of I've heard about that. I won't give anything away yet, but I've heard about that strip. Okay, yes. So and I just want to touch on something that I know is like, could be tricky to talk about. People are like, oh, there's gatekeeping. You know, suddenly people are going out there and stuff. Alex, what are you, because I know that we have to be considerate about the numbers. We have to be considerate, Alex, about the ecological work that's happening there, the cultural work that's taking place. We are being careful, and then obviously, you know, we can't all have one big gathering, but then we'd like to go out there and interact with the land. What's the idea around access? I just want to clarify that, put it to bed, and we move on to the next topic.
Put it to bed, hey, Cindy.
Just put it to bed, darling.
I don't think there's anything nearly as neat as that that I can offer, but I can offer some of the thoughts that we're working with right now. You know, as Mon said, AfrikaBurn is in a very tricky financial moment right now. It's a reality of a model that historically has been very wedded to one event that creates all the funding stream. And so this conversation is so alive for me because we've been having lots of discussions around how do we enable our community to gift resources in order to make sure that this thing that we love is able to grow and evolve and be into the future. And one of the interesting, like, uncomfortable sticky points for me has arisen around we're not a transactional kind of entity. So we don't want to set up a dynamic where people who have means have more power or more privilege or more, you know, rights in or access to the space. That for me is a very fundamental principle that we need to guard against. So in these conversations we're having around how we enable gifting so that we can bring more of this in the world, the idea of gatekeeping has been very strong with me, and it isn't fully resolved right now. It's like a living conversation that we're having meetings about, like right now, to make sure that what we create is more of what we want to see in the world, and not reduce access for those of like a very typical demographic. Like we don't want to fall into the same patterns that we're trying to desperately fucking get out of. So that's, I know that it's not neatly tied up, but that's something that is very present for me. And if people have more thoughts they want to share, please do get in touch with us. The second thing I wanted to say around this is fundamentally, I believe that if we're going to start to make decisions that create a more diverse, inclusive AfrikaBurn, then the people who are making the decisions need to reflect the demographics of who we want to be AfrikaBurn. And that's been something that we've been trying hard at over the past few years. It is slower going than many of us would like, but I think fundamentally, as we said earlier, like the stuff is systemic. Charity is bullshit. We don't want to be giving out, like, that's not what it is. That's not what we're here for. We want to change the systems that have created the
relationship,
that relationship of power, exactly, that so typically falls down the lines that we're all very familiar with. So that's, for me, is the second thing, is that we're trying to transform our decision-making structures so that the perspectives that are inside of the rooms where decisions are made are actually reflective of who we want to be in the future. And I think that fundamentally is the most transformative thing that we can do. And then, yeah, so if anybody wants to help us.
So you don't consider the Anati program a
yeah, I mean, I think Luz is here. So if, yeah, so I can't speak to all the incredible things that she's doing. So maybe you want to check if Luz wants to say a few other things, because there's lots of programs that AfrikaBurn has been creating and growing. And Cindy, I don't know if you want to speak to it, if you want to check in with Lorraine.
So I think the reason why I'm just sort of mentioning it is that, you know, we just had this, and I had an incredible idea, by the way, as we were talking with Gail, and Monique was telling me all about the eco trip, and you were talking about the ecological developments and stuff. And I thought, wow, an ecological outreach, you know, that's a mix of skills development about how to create, you know, how to create, like I said, pollutions and sanitization and water and so forth. And I thought, what an incredible opportunity to do an ecological outreach with township residents, or let me say informal settlements. There is a difference between townships and informal settlement. What we saw from Gail was an informal settlement. As you said, it was not set up to become a township. And I'll touch back with you, Gail, in terms of the kind of heritage. It might be so difficult to talk about heritage in a space that was not sort of historically created as a heritage site, it wasn't built around community. So there isn't a sense of community. It's everybody, they're just bucking and sucking and staying and building on top of each other. And I know that there's change that you want to see there. And we all go through, you know, drive through past townships and think, oh my goodness, you know. And so I think what I would like to my idea that came out of that was like, wow, how great an opportunity to bring displaced people that are now in these informal settlements to come, like as a part of skills development, or if they're part of like an art center or a creative center that are building with ecological bricks or whatever it works with our ecological objectives, and to kind of have an outreach or each one teach one type of opportunity there. And I thought, and I've waffled on about that idea.
But just to say, Cindy, I mean, I love what you're saying, and what is so present for me is that we have to move carefully. Like we need to
yes.
to try pilots, because like acting at scale can often lose people, like make people feel as if they're not being cared for. So I'm so glad that Gail is here, because we have to start this conversation across these realms. And where do we start in a way that is small enough for us to be able to really take care in the way that we engage with it? I think Mons wanted to build on that.
Yes, Mons, please.
I didn't necessarily want to build on it. I just wanted to say that in a very simple answer, straightforward answer, is that yes, we actually are kind of holding the door closed for a while, and be very cautious about what we're allowing to happen there at the moment. Very, very simply is because we have to do due diligence on that space. There's statutory requirements, there's all sorts of requirements, and then also just kind of listening and feeling through the space. So it's actually quite nice to kind of do smaller amounts of people and kind of work out how it's working. So it's just a very considered thing. And we have to do it that way. But it's not exclusionary, as Alex was saying. At the forefront of our thinking is what is the most radically transformative thing that we can do with that space? Because if AfrikaBurn is theoretically about inventing the world anew, we do have to imagine first, and then we have to reason later. And that's the foundation of what we do and how we act. So that's why, for example, hopefully our financial woes are just a hiccup, like a fairly sizable hiccup, but we have to, like, that's what the alchemy of AfrikaBurn is that no one set out to start a business or an event that worked in XYZ ways. The point is to create a space in which you can imagine, where you can, and that's what I feel like it dovetails really strongly with what Gail was saying about you don't want the tail to wag the dog at all. That's not what we want, ever. We want to imagine first, reason later, and utilize the massive amount of care and consideration and expertise and the richness that lives in this community, as well as invite new potential communities in. And buck models. We don't like the charity model. We don't like, those kinds of models. Like, let's not use the same paradigm that caused all the shit to fix the shit. That's not what we are here for. Because certainly for me, I'm not interested in doing it if that's the kind of shit that we're going to be doing. So unfortunately, yes, we are actually being fairly closed door, but we're just being cautious, and we're doing the considerate thing, we do. Yeah, there's a lot of environmental and kind of particularly heritage level work that we have to have done, and kind of mitigation projects around people accessing those sites, because it's a really important history to showcase, and we must do it beautifully and cleverly, and in a living manner. And so, yeah, it's just we must do that diligence. We've got to honor the land, we've got to honor the history, and we've got to honor the future. And so that's why the short answer is yes, we are actually still holding the door closed to an extent. It's wide open for all sorts of inputs, but we are looking very forward to having that done, and a lot of those things in place, and everyone pulling in and being able to be more open door with the space. But it is starting to happen, and it really is a heartening thing. So yeah, and yes to everything that Alex said.
Thank you. So I think I might have answered the question, is how do we honor or maintain or bestow Kwaggafontein stains? And for you, Gail, there would be Deep Slope relative township heritage in a way that invents the world anew. And I think then, Gail, for you, that may be what is your future desire for that community? How and what kind of heritage do you want to sort of bestow on that community? Because as I said, it's an informal settlement. It's not a township as yet, but it could grow into one. I don't know. But how do we honor and maintain and bestow Kwaggafontein's heritage in a way that invents the world anew? Alex, Monique, and then Gail, please.
One of the things that gives me life about being involved in the burn is, like I work in parastatal and very much in like government, public-private partnerships, like policy maneuverings, and AfrikaBurn is the perfect opposites to so much of that world, because there are so many beautifully mad people involved in AfrikaBurn, and the amount of imagination that gets brought to bear on how we do something that honors the land in a way that is just completely outside of what would usually be considered is such a joy. And we throw around the word radical all the time, and sometimes I think it gets overused and not really applied enough. And I really do think that this is an opportunity to dream big. I mean, we've spoken about AfrikaBurn's financial issues, but the richness of AfrikaBurn is the people, like the most remarkable, thousands of remarkable people who are passionate about entering into a transformational space. And that's what we're needing to lead into. And, like in terms of what Mons was saying about holding space, it's been a very thorough year and a half of doing archaeological studies, figuring out the water capacity, like getting botanists and geologists and all sorts of specialists on site to figure out like what we're working into, because we don't want to stumble in and like fuck a bunch of stuff up because we haven't first observed and listened. And I think, like Mons has really been leading the charge of like walking that place flat and then dragging so many people along with her. And, it's been this process of getting to know this piece of earth, and figuring out what it is we need to honor. And there's some great maps that have started to emerge around like the spaces that we need to keep sacred and safe, the spaces that we can start to use. So I think that the kind of spatial planning approach is critically important to what we're doing, so that we can then give the options on the table that we know are responsible, because this whole dynamic of now having agency it comes with so many responsibilities, and so we're reaching the point where we can start to open the doors in terms of what could we do here, like what kind of crazy restoration activity can we do? Can we build a giant mandala that's irrigated to create land art that can be seen from an aeroplane? What are the limits of our imagination based on first a very slow engagement with like what is it that we're now responsible for?
Mons, do you have anything to add to that before I sort of, go to one more question? Well, actually, I'll go to Gail.
Yeah, I mean, very fundamentally, like for me, the approach is also what is the opposite of what the land has been used, because as I was saying about the paradigm in which, and it's in which kind of the land has been used, the manner in which it's been used, and the manner in which land has been acquired in this country. I mean, we cannot not look at that history. I mean, there's not one parcel of land in this country, actually in the world, that has not been ill-begotten. And if we don't deal with that, who the fuck are we actually? And so what's the opposite of extraction? So that's where the earth jurisprudence stuff comes in. And so the parameters we're working on, because with that open source model where we are going, here's our blank canvas, tell us what you want to do, we're going to have an assessment criteria around what are suitable projects. And so we are working on those. We're getting close to, we've got a very solid first draft. But basically the earth jurisprudence model is that you are treating the land in its personhood as if it's a human. I mean, but we want to have more reverence for it. So fundamental questions are, does that activity add back to the land? What does it add back? What does it gift back, rather than that extractive model? And so these are the foundations that we're working out. And, like, again, I would say that we are really challenged capacity-wise at AfrikaBurn. So we are doing really good work, but I wish we could speed it up. And we've got fantastic volunteers on every level, but it does take a bit of time and consideration. But it is, for me, it's an extremely exciting project. But yeah, the personhood of the land. So I mean, if you think about burns and any ecologic project, is that you start with community, and that piece of land is a part of our community. she, I'm sorry, I always use the female term to describe her, but it feels that way for me. She's one of us. She's part of our community, and we must gift back to her, and she's gifting to us already. And so that's the foundation.
And can I just say before we move on is that...
Oh, Gail,
like,
sorry, Alex. Gail was next on that question.
okay.
I thought Alex maybe just wanted to add to what Monique had said. Alex, right?
Oh, go ahead.
Yeah, just to clear it out, is like, we're under no illusions. Like, we don't know everything. We don't know what we don't know. We're so open to being told we're wrong, to learning. So it really is like, if anybody wants to add in to what we're doing, we really are in this like process of figuring it out together. And yeah, that's all.
Thanks, Alex. Gail?
So Cindy, I mean, I think you summarized it just now. I mean, I think I envy your blank canvas that, you know, anything is possible.
Yeah.
You know, I'm very conscious. I'm a white woman. I live in Sandton. Diepsloot's my happy place. I love working there. But, you know, it is a you know, a teeming mass of people. It's actually partly informal settlement and partly, you know, there are township areas in Diepsloot. And I think I was reminded a long time ago about the phrase, nothing about us without us. And so I might have a big dream. We've got this Diepsloot 2030 vision that came from the work that we did in the early days with Dr. Barbara Holtman. But, you know, those things become politicized. So there's many groups. There's I Love Diepsloot, and there's Protect My Diepsloot, and there's a residents association, and everyone's kind of scrambling for brownie points, for political, you know, points and all of that sort of thing. So the sad thing is that there is no real heritage. People go home to practice their cultures. You know, people, I have some amazing young people I work with, and they'll say, I have to go home to consult my ancestors. I can't do it here because this is not, you know, my home. And yet, so when children are invited on Heritage Day to come and dress up, the kids of means come in really gorgeous little outfits, and the others come with kind of a few artifacts. And it's got to do more with money than, you know, I don't have money to buy that outfit or whatever. But we've had, every year we have a social goods summit, which is part of a kind of a whole UN week where we're talking about issues of where's technology taking the world. And 2 years in a row, the conversation has been about we don't know our culture. The creatives are saying we should make videos about our culture. How sad is that? We don't know enough about, so I can, you know, we've had a room full of people and they kind of come with beads around their head or whatever, and they say, you know, this is my culture, but I don't know anything about it. I don't know where it came from. So there's enormous opportunity, but it's also really sad. And it's not my movie, you know, it's a big space that is already quite messed up. I nearly used some of your words. I mean, it is quite fucked up if you look at it. I mean, it really is.
Feel free, Gail.
So I would love that blank canvas, but I've got to kind of sometimes just stick to my lane. Otherwise I wouldn't sleep. You know, there's times when there's so much to be fixed, and I'm loving the conversations about, you know, toilets and there's so much to do. You know, COVID has also been really bad to us in terms of donors and funding and things like that. So you do a lot with a little, and you kind of limp along. And I always say, if our doors are open and our lights are on, people can come there, access the internet, access a computer, get some business advice or whatever, and at least we're doing something. And I think what you guys are doing is amazing, but you got to, there's got to be that consultation, that drawing people in. You know, that's what transformation looks like. I mean, we're working on a project at the moment just to transform content creation. You know, the advertising agencies and that are all just, you know, the same people. So, you know, we're working at different levels as well. We're not just working on the Diepsloot infrastructure. We're looking at the industry infrastructure and that sort of thing. And it's exhausting. There's so much to do. And there's just never enough people, never enough money, never enough willpower, lots of political interference, making myself tired just thinking about it.
So right. So somebody, there are a couple of questions, I think, before I move on to a destination for locals. I see that, I know that we had a question where what are the plans for local access to and participation on Kwacha Fontaine? But I think that we've laid that to bed, Alex. I think we've answered that, and we understand what we're doing, we're taking a considered approach. And I think that by virtue of the agreement that we've entered into, we've disrupted the typical landowner dynamic. I think very much so, even with you, Gail, you've disrupted the typical art center dynamic in your approach, and how and what kind of projects you're creating in the township. So I'll move on to some of the questions that people have been asking us. And I do have a question as well, just for one more question for Stephen Sack as we go along. So if you can just stay around longer, Stephen, it's around the land. So the question was, I'm curious to hear any reflections on how the changing space and the nature of us occupying space as stewards and custodians on Valfontein and Kwaggafontein shifts realms of possibilities for artists, particularly in view of the contested nature of space in South Africa and legacy of barriers to access. So I think it's about the reflections on how the changing space and the nature of how we're occupying and using and looking after the land shifts realms of possibilities for artists. And I think this will be for all my speakers. Monique, could you start on that? And Stephen, could you help me join in on that?
I'm gonna not lie, but I spaced out while you were asking the question because I thought it was for Stephen.
Stephen, are you there?
I was reading something.
Stephen Sack.
Go, Stephen, save us all.
Stephen 2 asked the question.
I
not
have
Stephen's
that I asked questions actually. So this one is
my question got answered.
Yes,
was
please go
about
ahead.
whether they had internet access, and I'm pleased to hear they have some.
Yes, they do.
But yeah, and I think that one of the things that I think everybody has to grapple with is the issue of class. You know, when we've looked at the cultural sector, all the mapping we've done around the people who work in the cultural and creative economy, it really is a middle class community. And there are even more nuances of it. I mean, we've just been doing research into the gaming and animation industry, and the people who get involved in it, their parents come from professional classes. Their parents are in managerial jobs, are part of the middle class. And so as you interrogate your practices, you know, you have to just consider those factors. And then as you try and create this more connected environment where you're trying to reach across class barriers, then you've got to really interrogate very clearly what is possible. And I think that's the rethinking that we're all trying to do. And that's where I hear you say these problems around models of charity and not-for-profit organizations and that whole environment. There's no question that they succeed in helping people to transition out of the working class. No question, it's a gateway. But people from the working class who are going to be coming to you are coming because they are seeking opportunities for change in a different way to the way in which your middle class members are coming to the engagement. And so the nature of a festival, I mean, the Rand show is interesting in Soweto. It's really interesting because of who goes there. And so it's about how do you, what is the possibility of creating spaces which enable, so, you know, the beach in Rio de Janeiro, the beachfront, you know, clearly there are going to be all kinds of people from the favelas engaging in those spaces. So in your geography, Diepsloot, you are in a working class community. That's where you are. And Kwaggafontein, you know, you're kind of in a very, you're in a district of a different order. So I think I would, you know, we would really need to sort of understand those aspects of the human dimension, and what are the human resources within a working class community that self-identify, that step forward and connect, and will seek out. Only some kids go to the library. Only some kids go to Gail Steiger's center. Who are those, and adults, who are those people? What is it that's driving and motivating them to enter into those spaces? So it's got to be very specific around the nature. It's not just everybody living in Diepsloot. It's not everybody living in and around Kwaggafontein. Very particular people who will want to kind of try and make some kind of transition.
Thanks, Stephen.
Cindy, I found the question. What I wanted to say in response to your question is, again, and I'm sorry if I'm being too obtuse, but again, I'm going to refer to the model of AfrikaBurn, is that the fertility and the richness, etc., of it comes from us not going, we know all the solutions. And I also feel like finding the right answer to things is around working out what the question is, the correct question is. And so in terms of kind of shifting the realms of possibilities for artists, especially in the context of contested space in South Africa, I feel like, so to a degree, what we do is we create the minimum viable product to kind of hold space for people who get involved in these things or have something that well up. And so, for example, like every year with AfrikaBurn, we have an art theme, which we work on, and people respond to it or they don't. But in my sense is that, and actually I'm going to refer to Stephen Tu's question in the comments, where he's asking who is us in relation to Kwaggafontein, a population, where do they live, how from the site, da da da. And this is another piece of work that we are needing to do, is we certainly have started meeting a whole lot of our neighbors, but those are the classically, they're the classic landowners who are beneficiaries of an unjust system prior to, actually no, forever. So there's a piece of work that needs to be done around researching who's in the area, because there's people who live in donkey carts. There's the people who live as laborers and have lived as laborers on white-owned farms for many, many moons. You know, there's the whole agricultural history of the space. It used to be under wheat production until the pound for pound wool kind of policy came in, and it was overstocked, you know, like, and the Tankwa River was dammed and the Doring River was dammed, and that's when water stopped flowing into the Tankwa Basin. So there's all these kind of stacked up like information, and again, we don't want to be presumptive about what the human landscape is. We want to do real research and find out what that is and who us is. At the moment, us is us as custodians of Kwaggafontein, who are deeply interested in doing the right thing. And so there's a humbleness about kind of like, we don't know what it is. We want to find out. And I think that's an important approach. So, but then back to but that's going to inform asking what the right question is. So when we talk about critically engaging with histories of dispossession and current dispossession, it's not an easy fix. There is no proper solution. It's a radically difficult question in the world and in the space. And we can only approach it with curiosity, care, and good intent, and openness to solutions. And I think that we have, and I think that the model of again, our open source model is going to yield good results as long as we handle that properly. And I think that if we write the ask question, we put the right kind of impetus out there, and I think that will be workshopped. You know, we've done a lot of kind of workshoppy processes, and they really are good. They do come up and distill questions, and it's really important to do that process work. So I'm imagining that we will challenge artists, and so one of the groups of people that have been coming to Kwaggafontein is whenever we can manage more people in the car or whatever, we do invite various artists who have been contributors to AfrikaBurn, very considered, you know, people who are interested, just to come and look, feel the space. No expectations, they go away. If something rises up, it rises up. If it doesn't, that's also fine. So yeah, it's a commitment to that model and to kind of care and consideration around all these things.
Thank you so much. We don't have much time now, but there was a question from, I'm just saying, for Thomas Steiner, and I think it's a question for everybody to consider. And the question is, what is your wildest dream or vision for Kwaggafontein in the far future when we'll all not be around anymore? I think beyond it just being a question, I think it's a notion of being. And it's something for us all to consider. What legacy, what are we intending to leave in that space? Beyond when we are all gone, considering that we've got a user factor of 100 years or more. When we go, what more? What are the possibilities for that space? So I'm going to leave it as a question on everybody's mind. And I'll leave it a question for you too, Gail. What legacy do you want to leave beyond when you're gone from that community? I think the work in itself will speak for itself, Gail. And I really want to thank you for participating and joining us. We found another sister in the mix of doing, in the mix of a duocracy that we have. And I thank you for taking the time out to join us today. And I thank each and every one of you that have come to join us. If anybody has any last words, I see Alex hands is up. I'd like to thank you, Mons. I know you're tired and you've been doing a lot, and you're always there to engage, and that's just absolutely beautiful. Thank you so much for the opportunity, guys, to do this intersection. And I'm so glad that we've got to hear some difficult stories. We've got to see some difficult things. We spoke about some interesting things along the way. And we actually had a conversation about transformation and transforming our thoughts and what transformation means beyond color and class and so forth. Thank you, Stephen Sack, for joining us and for always sharing your knowledge. And I think there's lots to consider when it comes to this master plan and how we can certainly find a way for us to be considered to influence change for funding and for participation and so forth. So thank each and every one of you for joining us today. Alex, you wanted to add some final words, my sister?
Thanks, Cindy, and thank you for coming up with the idea to do this series. It's so incredibly valuable, and yeah, we're very grateful for you dreaming us into being. I just wanted to thread, because it's so wonderful to be asked these kinds of questions, because it makes us like language some of the stuff kind of floating about in our heads. And And just to speak a little bit to what Thomas, Stephen too, and Stephen Thack said, there's something for me about health, dignity, and agency that feels really strong. And, you know, in terms of the legacy we want to leave, we want a healthy, functioning ecosystem that sustains life and enriches the local community and offers a space that respects cultural heritage and brings the possibility of innovation. And that comes in a context of, you know, what we're dealing with is still like what Steve Biko spoke about as the colonization of the mind. You know, in the Tankwa Valley, power dynamics remain what they have been for so long. And the social issues are very real. We're dealing with a lot of substance abuse. We're dealing with a lot of gender-based violence. We're dealing with a lot of trauma in these spaces. And I think something of, and there's anthropological work that we're looking at doing so that we're really understanding the context into which we're working. And a starting point for that is the work that we're going to be doing over the next 6 months with the Solidarity Fund. So if anybody would like to get involved in that work that we're opening up right now, that would be so wonderful. We're finding ways to build skills in that space, bringing people on board to be with us there that's a mixture of people from the Tankwa and people from other spaces to enter into conversation about social issues and the kind of skills that bring agency into these kinds of spaces. And the kind of last thought that I had was, and I also have my taproot in hippiedom, but you know, when you're in a space that is being loved and that is being given the freedom to be itself, then something transformational happens. And I think that's what we're wanting to work with. Like it's that we're wanting to be enablers of healing in a space that we're trying to heal. And yeah, we need lots of help because it's hard and wonderful and all of those things. And I look forward, Gail, to us seeing you in Josie and seeing you in the Tankwa too.
You're on mute, Gail.
I was saying cool and thank you. And I'd love to, I'm really busy, but I'd love to just share with you some of our ideas and things that have worked and things that haven't worked. So we'll be chatting. Thank you.
Thank you, Gail. All right. Anybody? Hi, everyone. Thank you for joining. Bye, guys. Bye, Lisa.
Love your work.
Thank you. Bye, Greg. Bye, John.
Bye.
Thanks for joining.
Bye.
Cheers. Cheers. Alex, thank you, babes. Oh, you were excellent.
No, you were excellent.